Hello friends, I'm Kayla and thank you so much for indulging me in a 10-year Q&A. I have been on this channel for 10 years. I'm doing a video every single month for the following year where I talk about the 10 years, something about it, either a sit down, a vlog, we're reflecting, okay? It's about realizing things. I have been jotting down your questions coming in from YouTube and Instagram, and I'm gonna answer as many as I can in like 40 minutes. That's how long I've given myself to film. Question number one. I'm so excited to film this. Like, do I just like talking about myself? I think it's just the idea that like I said out loud to you, give me your questions. Like, what are your burning questions? As if I'm that interesting, as if I'm that important. And then you deliver, like you do it. You always participate in the things that I send out to you. That's what makes me feel cared about, isn't the fact that, oh, people care about the answers to my questions. It's that you know I want to make content, and so you fulfill that need for me. Anyway, I hope I fulfill if you are really wondering about something, like there's a question here about what animal I would choose to have the legs of if I had to pick. So if you were really wondering that, I'm gonna answer it, and I hope I'm gonna give you everything you've ever wanted. Question number one. How much of your love of Booktube is books and how much is YouTube? I love this question because I think obviously mileage is going to vary, but I do believe in some sense that you have to love each equally in order to run a Booktube channel. And maybe that's an obvious thing, but there are so many, I think especially because when I think of Booktube, I'm certain there are so many niches on YouTube that are smaller communities and tend to have smaller creators, and therefore you're in charge of your own content completely. And even if you're a bigger creator or in a bigger community, or you're in some type of like genre on YouTube that does lead to being a bigger creator, you can still be in control of your entire channel, right? But a lot of the YouTubers that I watch, I know that they have editors, I know that they have teams, and they just like sit and they do the thing, and they don't actually have to care about YouTube in order to do it. But with Booktube in general, I just think that it's especially fun because you get to see people having a passion for the books, but also with the community. Like, you really have to care about the community. You have to want to structure a video and put it together and put it out there. And I think it really comes across when someone does care about that and when they don't. And maybe I'm just assuming things and it is so different. So let me know if you are a booktuber. Do you love both equally? Maybe to be like a consistent booktuber, you have to love them equally. Because I get 2 videos out a week and I always have. I like making this as much as what I'm doing in order to make this. I know some people ask like, would you ever make a YouTube channel about something else, or why have you stuck to Booktube? Anything resembling that type of question. Yeah, no, I just like love it here. This is really the place for me. Thanks so much for letting me do it. Somebody asked, actually I think this question came in quite a few times. It was like, what books have surprised you most? I know people want to know my favorite books of the 10 years. I'm not ready for that conversation. But as far as books that have surprised me, I can definitely pinpoint things that I wouldn't have read without this channel, or I wouldn't have read if I wasn't doing a certain video on this channel. So the ones that I jotted down that came to mind right away are Illuminae. That was one of the first times I really enjoyed a like wild sci-fi, strange kind of experience where it was about more than just the existential idea of space or like survival in space. It was, you're learning about all of these different machines and all of these different like robots and characters and the actual space travel itself. I read the first chapter in a video where I was reading the first chapter of a bunch of like YA fantasy and sci-fi things, and I don't remember loving it. And then I tried it out again, maybe like 6 months or a year later, and I loved it. 5 stars. Another one in that vein is Dune. Even like 5 years after that experience and like having read a bunch of sci-fi and loving it, I still didn't think that Dune was gonna be for me, but it was. My experience with Little Women comes to mind because I didn't and don't typically love classics. I don't really seek them out. I don't want to have like read all of the classics. I don't think that's important to my personal reading journey. And when I read Little Women, I didn't think it was going to hit as hard as it did. And now it's like one of my favorite books and one of my favorite movies. You Ride Upon Styx is another one that comes to mind because I read that in a video where I had never even heard of it. It was just recommended to me by my TBR.co, a website. And so that was a pretty great experience. That's one of my all-time favorites. Also, I wrote down Paul Tremblay just in general because my first experience with that author wasn't great, and A Head Full of Ghosts is so many people's like favorite horror book and like got them into horror, and I remember reading it and not loving it and thinking Paul Tremblay like isn't for me, and now he's one of my all-time favorite horror authors. And then obviously, well, maybe it's not obvious if you haven't been here for 10 years, but like the fact that I like fairy books is so crazy. That's one of those things that you say, if you told Kayla from 10 years ago something, like she wouldn't believe it. And I think people, when they ask that question, they're thinking like, as far as my channel, what I've done with my channel, like my audience size or money or something. I wouldn't be surprised by anything. I would be surprised if I told me 10 years ago that I love fairy books, not all of them, and I haven't read that many, but the fact that I have read any fairy books, Emily Wilde, Half a Soul, Throne of the Fallen, Quicksilver, and given them like 4 and 5 stars, some of them ended up in my favorites videos of their respective years. That's wild. I really did not do fantasy, and especially growing up, I did not want to read about mythological creatures, and I still steer clear of a lot of them, but for some reason fairies have snuck their way in, and I fuck with fairies. Okay, I definitely got some things about advice for YouTube channels, and there was one about like perfectionism and how to get over the fear of things not being perfect. And the way that I think of it is like a race car driver will tell you that the worst part of race car driving is before you get in your first accident, because there's so much anxiety, there's so much fear about that accident, because you know eventually like you're gonna crash, small or big, whatever. And as soon as you do crash, it takes away the anxiety because now you know what to expect. So I think that when you're posting videos on the internet, you can't be worried about perfectionism because like none of us are perfect just in general, but the first time you actually like make an editing error and still post it, or the first time somebody comments and says like, oh, something in your video is wrong, like your music was too loud, or did you notice like this clip was in the wrong place, or you accidentally didn't cut out that cough that you had in the middle. You have to have that experience before you can like fully be okay with the lack of perfectionism, because you will have been perfect in your mind up until that point. So you might as well just like get it out of the way and don't worry about it. And as far as like worrying and putting yourself out there, I think there's a lot of things I could say, some maybe not as helpful as others. One is like, maybe you would come across mean, but like when you post your first video, probably not that many people are gonna watch it anyway. People weren't watching my videos when I was posting them when I was 16, thank goodness. No one is thinking about you as much as you're thinking about you. So when you put something up, even if you know something is imperfect, probably nobody else is really gonna notice or care. I don't think that's particularly helpful or encouraging to anybody, but that's what I would say. And the opposite of negative self-judgment is not positive self-judgment, it's no self-judgment. So it's not about sitting there and like pumping yourself up and being like, no, you're great, like everything's gonna be great, trying to combat your negativity. Just have no thoughts about yourself at all. Just like exist, just put it out there and just be there. Sometimes a graphic isn't perfect. Sometimes the lighting isn't perfect. Sometimes I don't look shocking. I don't look perfect. Sometimes I forget to clean up the mess in the corner and you can see that my room isn't perfect. Oh, speaking of my room and my bed, somebody asked, do I move my bed to film? They've always wondered. I actually got this a couple times. And yes, the fascinating answer is I do rotate my bed. I have nothing else to say about it. I like filming from this angle. My bed's usually in the way, so I move it and then I can sit in front of the window, especially when it's a really gloomy day and I have to sit as close to the window as possible. I do rotate the bed. I've always done that. In fact, some of my very first videos are filmed just like this at this angle, and I moved the nightstand with the bed and put it back there, and it would be like in the way of the door, and I would get comments all the time. They were like, how do you open that door? I guess it's weird, but yeah, I rearrange my room. I'm not a proper adult. I don't even have a headboard, so it's not that difficult to just rotate the bed. What year would you relive of your channel is such a crazy question to me, and I feel like I wouldn't have had an answer for you before filming my 10 years on Booktube, where I had to confront everything that I had made and done and how I was reflecting on all of those 10 years, because it's not something I've ever really sat down and thought about. I think it's gonna be 2018. If you watch that 10 years on Booktube, that is the year. While I'm talking about it, I have a lot of like liveliness about it, and I'm talking about it in kind of a negative sense because that's the year I started a full-time job and also tried to keep up my channel. but because of my commitment and not willing to back down on anything that I wanted to create, it was the most ambitious I'd ever been on my channel, and the most like collaborations and the most things that I've started, and you know, book clubs, reading challenges, like all of this live stuff was going on while I was maintaining 40 hours in an office. But the year was just so important for my own personal growth, for learning about myself, for feeling fulfilled, for having different ideas. And so it's a year I don't look back on fondly as far as how busy I was and how stressed out I know I was, but I think I would relive it for like the lessons and for the joy that came out of so much of it. Also, actually, it's not even about reliving the time on Booktube, but my actual life. Like, life was interesting. Life was different. It was the first time after many years that I had done something outside of my comfort zone, and I loved my job. I was good at my job. Every day was so different and engaging, and there were definitely struggles along the way, but it was just like such a new, interesting environment to be in. And I have no doubt that one day I will be back in like a social media manager or marketing manager position at a company in an office, because I just think it's like a good place for me to be sometimes. Somebody asked where I get inspiration for vlog ideas, and I don't know if I have an answer to this one, so I don't know why I wrote it down. I think I'm just such a fan of the internet, and I still spend my time on the internet as a fan of it. I don't watch anything on the internet with the intent of getting an idea for my own job. I don't consume things with a plan of, oh, how can I turn this into something else? And therefore, I think it naturally happens. So I guess the answer is I get inspired by things that happen on the internet. Mostly like, well, I guess like, I don't know, maybe like half of the content just comes from my own brain, things that aren't really hard to turn into something. Like, I'm sure when you're talking about inspiration for video ideas, you're not thinking, oh, how did you come up with the idea to read 5 dinosaur books in a week? Because that shockingly came out of my own head, I know. But ideas of like challenges specifically usually come from somewhere else. And I think I've given credit every single time where I say like, oh, somebody like Sophia or the Try Guys, or like somebody was doing this type of video in their niche, and I thought, how can I turn it into something bookish? So I think just because I favorite and I like and I bookmark things that I personally just enjoy, when I'm looking for inspiration, when I'm trying to think of ideas, I go to that list of things I've already watched and consumed, and I'm like, oh, this would actually make interesting content for myself. I had a couple people ask about privating old videos, like why I do it or how I decide what to private or how that works, I guess. And I think majority of it is because I private like 30% of the videos that I make. And I go into, I think, most videos when I post them, knowing which ones are going to be private one day. Like, that's just something naturally that's happening in my head because they feel very of the time, or they're for the audience that I currently have. For example, if I was gonna do a video today that was like reacting to my closet unhauls from 10 or like reliving the closet unhaul. If I were to ever then private my closet unhauls, I know that video would also want to be privated because it's about a journey that we're on together. Every Q&A that I've ever done, I've privated within probably 6 months because one, I don't want to go back and watch it. And if I did, maybe I would change my mind and keep it up. But I just assumed that myself from 6 months ago, 1 year ago, 5 years ago would have a different answer. And I just want anything that somebody could currently come to my channel and watch to be an actual embodiment of who I am in the moment. Also, there are just things that feel timely, like TBRs, book club announcements. I don't think anybody is going to watch a book club announcement of the books that I'm reading for the Literally Dead book club like from 3 years ago. So I just don't want it to bog down my channel. I don't want it to come up when anyone searches me. I don't want you to have to scroll past that to find something you actually want to watch. And there are just so many of my videos that are connected. Like, they're having conversations, they're reacting to something that happened in the past. And if that doesn't feel relevant anymore, then I just don't keep it up anymore. I also just, for the majority of the things that are private, which is anything from the first like 4 years of my channel, that's just because I hate the way I talked about books. I don't think it's valuable for anybody to go back and watch those as far as getting, like, maybe there's an entertainment quality to it, but that's not enough for me to keep it up because the actual book reviews are adding no value besides you just getting to know my rating, which you can see on Goodreads. The way that I spoke about books was just me going, it was written really good. I thought the plot was really good. The atmosphere was really good. And it's infuriating to go back and look at myself speak about books the way that I did. It's the same way I look at Instagram. When I post on Instagram, I know that that Instagram is only going to live there for like the year, and then it's going to be archived, because it's usually, if it's like a video promo or it's a picture that I don't absolutely love, I just want things to be a little more curated, I guess. And it's not about the content being curated, it's like the overall vibe. Just like when you scroll through any of my social media, I want that image to be curated. When you actually click on the video, it's a whole mess. Somebody said, you say you'll read pretty much anything. Are there any hard limits? And it's funny because when I made that video and the 10 years on Booktube, and I was like, here's then versus now, things that I read, things I don't read, I forgot about true crime. I do not read true crime. That's not something that I would ever, I think, intentionally pick up for myself. So that's my answer. 10 years ago me, I wasn't reading fantasy. 10 years later, I'm not reading true crime. That's my hard genre rule, I think. But also, me and reading, what was I about to say? Me and reading, we have a strange relationship. There are books that I appreciate or even like and rate highly by the end, but I don't want to read. So it's a challenging like conversation. Anytime I say, well, that's not something I really want to read, somebody will say, but you read this book and you liked it. And so I don't know how to express myself properly, but there are things that I absolutely do not want to read. And if I know that a book is that going in, I'm probably not going to read it. So one of my things is currently cults. I don't really have an interest in cults. I never want to read something about anyone underage engaging with somebody who's not underage. I don't want to read like the age gap romances. I don't want to read an abuse of a minor, even if it's not about the book. I know that the book is saying things intentionally, it has a message behind it. And I have read books that have to do with like sexual abuse, and they've been so powerful, and I respect them, and I've even rated them highly. But if I know that there's certain books that are recommended to me that I'm not gonna pick up, because I know that that's the content. And even if there's gonna be something good that comes out of it, I just don't want to be reading it. I have a big thing with power dynamics and the imbalance of that. And I don't know if that's something that will ever change. As usual, I got just as many questions about will I ever write a book as I usually do, even though in the video where I asked for questions, I said, I have no interest in writing a book. So no, I don't have any interest in writing a book. Somebody did ask though, if I had to write a book, like what would the genre be or what would it be about? And the thing about books is the people who should be writing books are people who have a good idea and or are good at writing. And I don't know that I know I'm not this one. I don't have any idea. I don't have an idea. I think I would want to, if I had to write a book, it would be from the perspective of a person who doesn't exist. That's my idea, because I always want to read a book like that. That's my only idea, is I would want to write a book from a perspective where at the end you find out the perspective you were reading from isn't a real person. But I don't want it to be like a hallucination or an imagination of someone. I just want them to not exist. But like, what does that even mean? I don't know. So no ideas. Do I think I could be good at writing? I don't know. I would have to try. Have I read enough books that I think I could string together some scenes? Maybe. Do I think I would be better at editing someone else's story or collecting stories for an anthology, publishing something nonfiction? Essays? Yes. I think if I were to ever publish anything, it would be in that realm, not in the fiction ideas creativity section. Somebody asked, what is your favorite video series? Oh, no, wait. It was a video series or challenge I wish I could take back. Oh God. I thought it was going to be positive. I think it's my 5-star prediction series, because I didn't end up with a 5-star. I can't remember, because I don't want to go back and watch, because I know it was just a miserable time. I don't remember how many videos were in that series. I think maybe it was 10, but now that I think about it, it might have been 7. And I read 2 books in each video, one book chosen by me, one book chosen by subscribers in each video. And I think like all of them were 3 stars. And while I think that negative reviews and even like hate-filled reviews can be fun, and I like videos that contain that, The mediocre, like mid ratings, that's not fun. A whole video of just 3 stars is so uninteresting to me, bums me out when I have to post. So the fact that I had to post a whole series, like I wasn't gonna cancel the series. And obviously I didn't know how it was gonna go until the end. So I kind of had to keep posting them, I didn't have a choice. I probably would take that back now. I don't know if those are all private. That experience did have an impact on my channel, I think, because I don't do a lot of recurring series, like monthly series, because I'm scared that the series will start to flop and I don't know how to recover from that. So I just like don't want to commit to big long series. No, here's what it is. It's that TBR was decided at the very beginning. I'm still down for series where I'm choosing the books in each respective video, but like saying the TBR at the beginning and then having like a whole year of having to read the things I committed to, even if it starts to flop, that's the fear because it's happened. So I think it's made me adjust how I think about doing series. Oh my gosh, I didn't prepare for this question. I wrote it down. Who are the any booktubers that you miss? And I feel like I should have thought more about this or thought about it at all. I have 2 people that instantly came to mind, and that's Kat and Chanel. But I know there's people who I popped up in the video, the 10 years on Booktube, where I talked about like who's given me inspiration, who I was watching at the time. And a good amount of those people aren't making content anymore. These are 2 people that like, I don't watch vlogs instantly. Usually things sit in my watch later for a couple days before I end up watching them. There's a small select amount of booktubers that I watch as they show up in my sub box. Those 2 are people who I just found very engaging to watch. I really like what they had to say, and they aren't currently posting content. So I hope they come back. As far as booktubers in general, it's really, this has nothing to do with the people I just mentioned, but like there's 2 things that happen for me that are really frustrating when a booktuber comes onto the scene. Either they don't see their own potential, or they don't find an audience and they don't grow as big of an audience as I think they deserve. And that's 2 really difficult things to watch, is when somebody joins and I really think charisma is the #1 thing you need for booktube. And that's not something that can be taught. So when people ask for like booktube advice, one of the things is just like being good on camera, and that is something that you can learn over time for sure, and film yourself. And as far as like booktube tips, one of my booktube tips is like film yourself, edit it, don't post it multiple times. That's your practice. Not everything has to go up, and I think that's when you'll find out if you like the journey enough to want to post, because the editing is actually a lot more intimidating than you might think. And I think there's like some good practice you can get just by talking to the camera for a while before you actually ever post anything. I think some people don't see their own potential, and I see it, and they have so much charisma, and they're so good on camera, and they're so funny, and they just like, they don't continue and they just disappear. And it's such a frustrating thing to watch when I see someone's potential of being like one of the biggest booktubers and they just like lose interest, or they don't find their people. And I try to like support them as much as I can as one person, or like promote their stuff, or like invite them to things, and they just never find the audience that they deserve. That's a really frustrating thing to watch. And those 2 things happen all the time because I'm constantly watching new booktubers, like all the time. And that's always been my #1 booktube tip, is to watch other people and engage with their content and participate. And it's not for you. It's not for you to then like, someone sees you in the comments and they go subscribe to your channel, or this person sees you in all of their readathons and so they invite you to host a readathon. It's not for personal gain in that way. It's for personal gain as far as like being a part of something, learning to participate and support people as much as you want to be supported. And I just think that good things come to you when you do good things outward. I like to imagine that's the world that I live in, and so I make it so. And I know I got some kind of questions in here about the landscape of book content, how I feel about like certain trends or certain waves of people coming into the book community, like how I feel about book talk. And the thing I'll say about book talk is it made it a lot more normal to talk about being an internet personality, because book talk is like such a such a phrase now. You see it around bookstores. And yes, I completely agree that Booktube has been really underappreciated and underrepresented as far as the book community spaces, because people think that Book Talk is the first place people talk to about books, or this is the only place that authors really get noticed, or like it's had such a big impact on publishing and readers. But Booktube was really, and book blogging was really responsible for a resurgence of the love of reading. It absolutely was. But Book Talk has made making content so accessible, and just the time that Book Talk became a thing, you know, vlogging cameras started being produced at a more rapid, wide rate, and anybody can film something. It's such a more casual way to make and consume bookish content that I absolutely understand the appeal of it. I don't find myself on Book Talk as much as I like want to be. I don't love short form content as much as I want to. I also just like don't love staring at a phone. Not only has Book Talk made it more accessible to talk about books, but it's made it more widely acceptable. People like understand Book Talk as a career. TikTok made it so the average person walking down the street, if you say, oh, I make content on the internet, they get it. They know about the Creator Fund, or they know about sponsorships. They've seen ads on TikTok. Like, they get it more so than YouTube. And so saying something like, oh, I make content about books, everyone who I've ever said that to in the past like 4 years, it's never been a longer conversation than that. It's like, oh, that's really cool. Oh, I've seen this. I totally get that. 4+ years ago, the conversation was so weird to navigate. It was like, first of all, I make videos on the internet in my bedroom. No, wait, not like that. I talk about books to people. Oh, do you read books to people? No, I read them and then I tell people about them. And people watch that? Yeah, they do. Never mind. I do advertising for publishers. I work in marketing. Nowadays, it's like if you say to somebody, oh, I make bookish videos on the internet, I make 6 figures a year, it's like not the craziest thing I've ever heard. I got asked a couple times what my least favorite book has been over these past 10 years. And that's easier for me to answer, I guess, than my 10 favorites, because I think there's just a pressure involved with the favorites. With least favorites, as soon as I saw that question come in, I was like, oh, let me go through my Goodreads and check out all of my 1 stars or books that I didn't write. And then a book immediately popped into my mind. And so I didn't go look at the list, because I think that there are books that have been more offensive, had worse plots, were more problematic, like that I feel like I actively hated on more while reading. But I don't think that there's a book worse that I've experienced than Only Revolutions by Marcy Danielewski. And when I put out my list of 10 favorites, I fear House of Leaves will maybe be in the first position. And maybe that's why I feel more comfortable actually listing this one, because I know the author is good and I know that there's something that I love. And so I don't feel bad bashing on a book, but it truly is one of the most unreadable things that I've ever experienced. And I can't believe it was written. Actually, I can't believe it was written because, oh my God, if House of Leaves wasn't written before Only Revolutions, I'm just about to sound like the stupidest person alive. But it must be the case where it was so successful and it was so interesting and it was so different and such a good book that they were like, well, whatever you want to put out next, we'll publish absolutely anything. And they did. Somebody asked if I could know the star rating of any book, like as a magical power, just by touching the book, would I take it? And I just think that is one of the most interesting things I've ever been asked, and I want to know your answer to it in the comments. If you've gotten to this point in this video and you've listened to me yap this long, this is what I want you to engage with in the comments. Would you take it? I have a feeling the average reader would say yes, because if you're reading 5 books a year, 20 books a year, you want to make sure you're reading good quality stuff. If you are stingy about what you're purchasing, what you're spending time with, you would want to know that everything's going to be great. I don't think I would take it. I wouldn't want to know the star rating, because then I would like never ever read a book that's a 2 or a 3. And yeah, that'd be good because I wouldn't waste my time on it, but I think it would just make my reading so weird. And if I touched a book and just like knew it was going to be a 5, I think that would mess with me. I think it would mess with like what I ended up picking up. There are so many books that would still be so good for me to end up recommending to other people, but I would just never end up reading if I knew going into it was going to be a 3. And if I know it's going to be a 5, I think it would like squander my enjoyment going in. Just like, okay, this is going to be the best book of my life. Like, okay. And maybe some people go into every book thinking it's going to be their new all-time favorite. And so it wouldn't affect them that much. But now I have the question of what legs I would take of an animal. And I want to be logical about it because I'm thinking, am I the only person who has this? Or does everybody get animal legs? If it's just me, I would pick the legs that are most human-like because I don't want I don't want to be like that lady on the street who has the legs of a tortoise. Why would I choose a tortoise? I don't know. There is like an aspect of it that's like, okay, maybe you'd become like rich and famous if you were the only person with like tiger's legs, right? But I don't want to be a zoo attraction. I don't want to like tour in a circus. I don't want people coming up to me, or I don't want fame because of how I look. So I would want something that's like unassuming. So if not everybody has animal legs, it's just me. I'm picking like, what's the most human-like? I want to say like a monkey, but maybe I would end up walking weird, but that would be really convenient to have toes that are like fingers. I would like, my natural instinct is to pick some kind of cat, like a leopard or a tiger, a bobcat, something like that, because then I can run fast. Like they're so muscular. They're kind of human. I guess it's how tall the animal is. Or would I pick something that just has like the strongest knees? Because like I don't have great knees and I don't want to ever have to have a knee replacement. I probably will when I'm old. So do I have to have them right now? Next question. Was I born with them? Do I get them immediately right now, or do I choose when I get them? Because if I'm old and I could suddenly transplant my old legs with leopard's legs, I will do that. I just have too many clarifying questions, so I don't have an answer for you. If everybody is getting animal legs, we all have to have one, I might choose like a horse. I feel like I could make for a good centaur. And I could have like my gang of like My Little Ponies, and we could all just like hang out and be super cool. Okay, next question. Somebody asked why I dislike ebooks. Because I said in a recent video that my reading used to be primarily ebook. That was just because it was cheaper than physical books. I just never would prefer to read on a screen than staring at a book. Somebody asked me what my favorite fictional romance is, and I love this question. The relationships that I think back on are the ones from mostly my teenage years that I was watching, and I can tell you easily my favorite like romance type, my favorite romantic couplings, and the feelings that I'm always looking for in a book but can like never really find. And it's when you're following the first season of a show, you have a character who is dating like the perfectly safe option, who's like good for them and whatever. Think Rory and Dean, think Elena and Stefan, Jackie and Kelso, Blair and Nate. Now, those couplings are not perfect. We know them to not be perfect. We know that they're not actually like the nicest boys and whatever. But the way that we perceive them, especially in like the first season of a show, is that this is the safer option. This is like the comfortable, like good friend, like they're good for each other type of couple. And then we get to follow them for multiple seasons, and we find that usually it's like the female character discovers more about herself and she wants more. She unlocks a certain part of her personality that only a different love interest, Jess, Damon, Hyde, Chuck, can fulfill. And they don't necessarily have to be the perfect person in the end anyway, and they're problematic couples in their own right. But there's just something about watching that journey of going from the safe boy to the bad boy that has always done it for me. In real life, no, I just love watching that evolution. And it's not something you typically get in books, because often when you read, like, especially if it's gonna be set up as a romance, you're supposed to root for the couple you see right away. I think this is a reason that I love the idea of a love triangle, and I never steer away from it the way that other people do, because I do want to see that duality. I want to see the comparison. Even if you know who they're gonna end up with, I like seeing that character go on that journey. And even if they're not endgame. See, I wish that I felt about any piece of media the way that I did about these in their day, because it's just such a fun romance journey to watch, and there's a reason why it's everywhere. This is not a unique take of mine. So of course, if anyone has any recommendations that give off those vibes, and I have to read a whole series before I see a character move from one person to another who's like the right person for her, oh, that's what I want. I mean, you can recommend current day shows too, but I probably won't watch them, just being honest. I got a question asking if I think I'm a harsher rater than I was 10 years ago, and I think my answer is no. Maybe I would need to reflect on this one a little bit more, but I think just because I read more books, I have more negative ratings than I used to. Just as far as quantity, like when I started my channel, I read 50 books that year, and now I read 270. So there's more negative ratings out there. I think that there are worse books being published. I don't know if that's something that you all would argue with me about, or if that's like a bad take of mine. I know I have a lot of people commiserating with me about our 2024 not being good reading years. Like this is my absolute worst in 10 years. And their perspective, there's this desire to talk about how books are bad and like bad books are being published and why is 2024 books so bad? The thing is though, I'm not reading 2024 books. Like this year of reading, I've actually been reading so much older stuff from like the past 5 years, not old, but like from the past 5 years. It's been a mix of everything. So it's not specifically like this current day in publishing. If there are a lot of really bad books coming out in 2024, like I'm feeling for you. And I don't know, because this is probably the least amount of new releases that I've read. I might have to take that back at the end of the year when I actually do my stats, but I just don't think I'm reading a whole lot of brand new releases. And my last question is actually this one got asked a lot, which is just like, what's the biggest challenge on Booktube? What have you faced the most that has caused the most difficulty? Like what's the hardest part about this? And I think the only answer that I have is time. I don't really struggle with very much. I don't think I've struggled very much over 10 years, except for time. Time constraints are the things that I find the most challenging. When I want to put up a certain amount of videos, I want to read a certain amount of books, there's always so many more books that I want to read for a video that I can't fit in. I am a natural light only kind of person, so there's times of day, there's months of the year that I cannot film, and it's really frustrating when I want to film a vlog clip and it's not going to be, this is where you have to like be okay with a lack of perfectionism. For some reason, sometimes editing takes so much longer than I've allotted or I think it's gonna take. I don't know if this is a really valuable perspective to share for anybody if you're starting your channel. This is why I also think that practicing editing is a good thing before you actually ever post anything, just to get a gauge of how long things actually take and how quickly you can do things. Actually, I do have another tip, and that's to take classes. I think that when it comes to art, we have no problem taking, like the idea of taking a knitting class or a clay sculpture class or a painting class. But when it comes to technology, because technology is literally at our fingertips, some people perceive it as I should just be able to figure it out on my own. Everyone else has figured it out on their own. Like apps and programs are made in a way that I should be able to teach myself. And I would really recommend, especially if you don't come from any type of artistic or design background, taking some graphic design courses, because we don't only have to do things that are going to benefit us monetarily. Like, yes, I wish you all the success in a Booktube career and making this into something that is monetarily successful. If that's your goal going into it, that's perfectly fine. But I also think that it's a great hobby, starting out as a hobby, and we don't invest much time into our hobbies if they're not going to be lucrative financially. And we should. Like, you don't have to just take a graphic design class or a video editing class if you think it's gonna make you money. You can just invest in yourself and your hobby. Even though it's not like a tangible piece of art, it's still worth it to take classes on how to edit the most efficiently, or if you don't have an eye for design, like how to make a perfect thumbnail. Just learning the basics of Photoshop could benefit every single person who makes YouTube videos. Advertising is another time constraint you need to think about. If you want to make money from YouTube, a big part of it often is advertisements, and the time involved in that and going back and forth and having to like send a video like a week ahead of time, that's not something that I deal with very much because I prefer not to, but that's another time constraint thing you have to think about. Another piece of advice is like backlogging stuff. For anybody asking like how I'm so productive or how I am so consistent, the tip for consistency that I have is to have something in your back pocket when you fail, because you will. It's just a natural part of existing. I post 2 videos a week, and so if you want to do something similar, say 1 video a week, and you're filming the entire week, or you're filming 1 day a week, however you're doing it, you're posting the video, then you start working on the next week, then you post the video, then you start working the next week, the next video. What happens the week that you're sick? What happens the week that you just don't want to do something? There's a week you want to go on vacation. There's a week, whatever is happening, it's good to have a backlog idea. So if it was Booktube, for example, and on Wednesdays I post a sit down standalone video like this, and on Saturdays I post a vlog. For you, that sit down Wednesday video, you could film all 4 of those in one day at the beginning of the month. And then you have something to post every single week. So you're not actually posting like timely and in the moment, but nobody would ever know. I don't do that because I'm a natural procrastinator and I often get rewarded by my procrastination. But someday it'll bite me in the ass. But there have been periods in my life, like when I was working multiple jobs or I was way busier doing something else, that I would have that backlogged content. I would have something that I filmed months ago that I knew wouldn't matter when I put it up. Like you wouldn't be able to tell that I hadn't posted it in the moment, or it didn't matter. So I think preparedness is the #1 tip that I have for consistency, is knowing like 4 months in advance every single thing you're gonna post, which maybe that's like kind of a basic bitch answer. But for me, the only reason that I think I'm as consistent as I am is because I know what I'm doing. But you also have to have the kind of mind that can pivot easily. And if something doesn't go the way you want, changing the video to something else that day has to be kind of in the back of your mind. That's why it's good to have a list of ideas that you know you want to make, because sometimes you're filming a video and it just doesn't go the way you want. And so sometimes just completely changing up the content is what needs to happen. Obviously my advice can only go so far. Like I'm just talking about my niche little corner of the internet. If you're doing something different, I don't know what kind of advice to offer. But I really appreciated the amount of questions that came in that were about me and the 10 years specifically, some silly things, and then also a lot of thoughts about your own content and how I can offer any thoughts regarding that. I do have a channel membership, and regularly in our live shows we talk about things like making content and how to exist on the internet. I'm always down to answer your comments when we're chatting in our reading sprints, because we pause a lot to just yap. And that's it for me today. I will see you again in a month with another 10-year inspired thing. It'll be a vlog. I'm not sure what it is yet. I can't remember. I do have a list somewhere. I live and die by my lists because I can't keep very much up here these days. But otherwise, I'll see you in a couple days with, what vlog am I working on? Oh, it's my final vlog of 2024 is coming up next Wednesday. Is it Wednesday? It is, because that's Christmas. How has that come so soon? Anyway, thanks so much for being here, and I will see you later. Bye!